The one thing that I've noticed about David's career is that he's a real conceptual artist. Whereas a lot of people who call themselves conceptual artists or performance artists and what have you really do the same shtick forever. Bowie reinvents himself. He really does reinvent himself almost from the ground up.
He's one of the most important European musicians of the whole rock era. I think he introduced something that was always there but was unstated and very unclearly articulated, which was this notion of theatricality, this idea of, look, what we're doing is about theatre. It's not just about music. Nobody had done it quite as artistically as him.
I see him right at the top in his field. He's ahead of his time and always been ahead of his time. And I see him as a true artist, a true great in the way people have viewed the Beatles and Mick Jagger and Elvis Presley. And I think he'll go down as a very big legend, you know. I think we said it.
For David Bowie, born on the 8th of January 1947, the black and white banality of life in post-war London was transformed into widescreen Technicolor splendor the moment he heard this.
Ready, set, go, man, go. I got a gal that I love, so I'm ready. Ready, ready, set, I'm ready. Ready, ready, set, I'm ready. Ready, ready, set, I'm ready, ready, ready to rock and roll. Hey!
I think it was the pure dynamic quality of the music. I mean, for me, I don't think there'd been anything quite as electrifying as the very first time I heard a Little Richard record when I was probably about 8 years old. And at that very point, there was absolutely nothing else in the world that I wanted to do.
Run to the corner, pick up my sweetie pie, she's a rock and roll baby, she's the apple of my eye. I'm ready, 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 I'm ready, 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 I'm ready, 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 I'm ready, ready, ready to rock and roll.
That was it. I was sold completely. He converted me in just one playing. Actually, it was several playings, and I'll tell you why. Because my father had been given a bunch of records because he worked at Dr. Bernardo's homes. I think the official title was Public Relations Officer, and he was sort of virtually a PR. He'd been promoted up to being a PR for the children's homes, and often they were sent in some things for the children, and he brought home one day a bunch of records that somebody had given in, and I went through them all, and I took out about 3 or 4 and asked him if I could have them, and he said, "Oh, I'm sure they won't be missed." And one of them was this Little Richard record, but it was an American one. They're American records.
Gonna tell Aunt Mary about Uncle John. He claimed he has a music, but he having a lot of fun. Oh, baby, yes, baby, woo, baby, having me some fun tonight. Yeah,
I just went absolutely ape over the solos, and I cajoled my father into buying me a saxophone. And I think the one that was like a relatively affordable price on hire purchase was a plastic job from Selmer's. It was sort of a white thing with gold keys on. It was very flashy as well, so I didn't turn that down. And then I used to have a meet round to pay my dad back, I remember.
In 1957, his family moved to Kent, where Bowie, or David Jones as he was then, spent his formative years at Bromley Technical High School.
I think I had quite good reports for the first couple of years when I went to tech college after the 11 plus, and I was probably going to be quite, an adequate member of society and would have worked my craft reasonably well in the suburbs there for the rest of my life. Probably would have been completely happy, instead of only delirious at times and then depressed at others.
Increasingly distracted by the excitement of rock and roll and the novelty of teenage fashion, the only school subject he found really stimulating was art, taught by the congenial Owen Frampton.
Oh yeah, it was wonderful. He was a great bloke, Owen. I think, well, the class was pretty split about him. Some people thought it was a real bugger. But I think there were a bunch of us that knew he'd get us out of trouble all the time, so we could really push our luck. Those of us that were sort of dedicated followers of fashion, I mean, we knew we could probably get away with murder in his form. You couldn't if you were working in the metalwork form or whatever. I mean, he didn't mind that we sort of narrowed our ties and trousers and wore Chelsea boots and Italian jackets, but as long as they were all in the correct materials and were the right colour, you know. So it was the school tie but narrowed, and plain black blazer but shortened up, so it's only 14 inches from the back of the neck down to the base of the spine, and 14-inch bottom trousers, and Denson's high pointers, I think, were my footwear of choice. Denson high pointers, and then I move on to the sophisticated Chelsea boot when one of the sixth formers bought a pair. I thought, that has got to be mine. Chelsea boots are my future.
In summer 1963, at 16 and a half, Bowie left school with 2 O-levels, art and woodwork, and walked into a job in London's West End.
It was a job at an advertising agency on Bond Street. I think the company was called Nevendy Hurst. And they were a Yorkshire-based company, and they used to do things like, I remember raincoats, and I can't remember the brand of the raincoat, but I do know they did a slimming biscuit called AIDS, which presumably they've dropped now. And I was taken on as a junior, what's called pompously a junior visualizer, which means that I was a sort of a stick and paste artist for all the other buggers there who had proper art school training. But there was an artist there called Ian, who was obviously the hippest kid on the block, and he had a very short American-style crew cut and a bohemian beard, and he wore Chelsea boots and corduroys, and we used to buy John Lee Hooker records, and he was really instrumental into kind of getting me into blues as opposed to just rhythm and blues, because I'd been hip to things like Marvin Gaye and those original Chuck Berry things that came out and all that, but blues itself was something I hadn't really found. And he said, you know, you want to go near the real stuff, you know, all this electric bullshit. And so I went out and bought some John Lee Hooker records.
I got a wobbling baby, wobble me all the time. I got a wobbling baby, wobble me all the time. Wobble me in the morning, yeah. Wobble me all the time. Oh, wobble me, baby.
I only had the job for about 4 months, 5 months at Top Mac, I think. But I just couldn't stand the pace. The advertising world was too much for me. And I didn't have any interest in it. I mean, it was just so boring, sketching out, you know, trying to compete with sketching out raincoats and things. I mean, it just wasn't something I really had my heart in. I think I pretty much, you know, threw my lot in with music. I must have picked up the odd job. I must have been doing something to get some money together. I remember there was this endless period where I was like scrubbing out people's kitchens. I mean, I got one of those agencies where you were sent out to clean people's houses. I know I did that. Anything to pick up a few dollars. But I needed something that didn't tie me down in any way. So if an audition came along or whatever, I'd be free to do it, you know. And that when the other guys were free, I could do rehearsals with them and stuff like that. So it was most of the work was pick-up work, any kind of pick-up work I could get. So yeah, I did chuck in the steady job in Nevendy Hurst, and that's how I made a commitment to just try and rely on music to provide me with some kind of income.
Liza Jane by Bowie's first professional group, the King Bees, which he joined with his school friend George Underwood.
We were basically a rhythm and blues band, and they were a good local kind of clubbing band, and we did a lot of pubs, I think, and that nature of work. I think most of the bands did. The way we survived was in pub work. And the majority of the material was Muddy Waters or Chuck Berry. And George and I both had this thing about John Lee Hooker, so we converted a lot of Hooker's things to more heavyweight rhythm and blues, because mostly Hooker's stuff was solo, or at the most it was with bottle tops on the bottoms of his heels, that clicking kind of thing that Jagger liked so much. And we converted them into straightforward rhythm and blues songs, and they worked very well.
Music publisher and talent scout Leslie Kahn, who managed the King Bees, was the first of many to see potential in the young Bowie, but also the first to discover that he was not destined for overnight success.
Leslie was wonderful. He was so supportive, but I think he really didn't know what to do with me. I think the funniest thing about Les was that he said, well, look, I got a way that you can earn a few bucks. He said, I was thinking of having my office done by professional painters. If you take like half the rate that they would charge, he said, you can come up and do my office. So I ended up doing a whitewash job on the walls of his office with another of his clients, Mark Feld. Of course, it's Mark Bolan. So there's me and Mark Bolan like striping his wall with whitewash, saying, yeah, well, I'm going to be bigger before you. And it's just, looking back on it, it was such a ludicrous situation. It was very funny. Because we knew that it was going to be some time before either of us really took off, we were really close buddies at that time. And it was Mark that introduced me to the idea of running around Carnaby Street and King's Road after the shops had closed to go through the dustbins, because at that time they had shop-soiled shirts and things, and the buttons were missing and whatever, and they just throw them away. It was sort of excess. And by the end of the night, you could have quite a good wardrobe together for free, So Mark was full of these tricks. He was a real survivor.
Well, I pity the fool. I said I pity the fool. You know I pity the fool. I said I pity the fool. She'll break your heart one day, then she'll laugh as she walks away. Yeah, I pity the fool. Well, look at the people. They wonder what they're doing. They're just standing there, watching you make a fool out of me. Well, look at the people. They just wonder what they're doing. Well, they're just standing there, watching you make a fool out of me. I pity the fool. I said I pity the fool.
I Pity the Fool by the Mannish Boys, one of several groups Bowie fronted during the hectic mid-60s.
I think everything that happened in musically and artistically right up until 1970, it almost seemed that 1970 was the cumulative year for me. That's where it all sort of started to make sense. But I was just open for any kind of possibilities that would come along during the late 60s, middle 60s to late 60s. And for me, it was just stuff that I was learning about. I was learning about how to play rhythm and blues, learning how to write, finding all these, everything that I read, every film that I saw, any bit of theatre, everything went into my mind as being an influence. And I wasn't quite sure how I was going to use any of these influences, but I knew that the stuff that I really liked, the books that I was reading from Kerouac to Christopher Isherwood, films that I saw like Dr. Caligari's Cabinet, and even a stage musical at that time, Cabaret with Judi Dench. And I saw that, and the lighting, the stage lighting was phenomenal, because what I didn't know is that it was Brechtian lighting. It was just stark white light, and I'd never seen that before in my life, and that became a central image for me of what stage should look like. I'd never seen it in a rock and roll stage. That was lighting to die for, I never actually got it together to use it properly until Station to Station, like 10, 12 years later. But at the time I thought, God, that's going in my memory bank. That's an unbelievable look. So one door always opened up into many, many others, and I really took advantage of every possible influence and experience that I could have, and it just permeated in there and got mixed up into this stew that became all the elements of what I could use when it kind of became my turn. In a way, if anything had happened for me in the mid-60s, I really might have been cut off from an awful lot of influences.
Question time that says I've brought dishonor. My head's bowed in shame. It seems that I've blackened the family name. Mother says that she can't stand the neighbors talking. I've gotta pack my bags, leave this home, start walking, yeah. I'm guilty, I wish that I was sorry this time. I wish that I could pay for my crime. I can't help thinking about me. I can't help thinking about me. I can't help thinking about me. Now I leave them all in the Never Never Land. The station seems so cold, the ticket's in my hand. My girl calls my name. Hi Dave. Drop in, see you around, come back if you're this way again. I'm on my own, I've got a long, long way to go. I hope I make it on my own. I can't help thinking about me. I can't help thinking about me. I can't help thinking about me.
As the Monkees hit TV screens, another Davy Jones was about to become famous. So our Davy Jones opted for a new identity. The single Can't Help Thinking About Me was the first to be released under his new name, borrowed from the hero of the Alamo, Colonel Jim Bowie. He also had a new manager, Ken Pitt, who had been guiding the careers of show business stars since the 50s. His most recent successes included Manfred Mann and Crispy and St. Peter's. Pitt had gone to see Bowie at the request of his road manager, Ralph Horton. But, again, a commercial breakthrough proved elusive. Ken Pitt.
Well, I have called it his apprenticeship period. He learned a great deal, and I think what he most learned was the direction he wanted to go. It took a long time. When he first came to me, I wasn't sure what he wanted to do. Certainly, he never implied that he wanted to be a rock and roll star. At that time, I was looking for someone who could be an all-round entertainer. There were very, very few people who you could hold out much hope for. And I thought in David we had found someone who could be. And sure enough, when I spoke to Ralph Horton about this, and I told him what I was looking for, he said, well, you found your man. He said, that's exactly what David Bowie wants. David wants to be an all-round entertainer.
Rubber band. There's a rubber band that plays tunes out of tune in the library garden Sunday afternoon, while a little chappie waves a golden wand. Rubber band. In 1910 I was so handsome and so strong. My moustache was stiffly waxed and 1 foot long, and I loved a girl while you played tea time tunes. Dear rubber band, you're playing my tune out of tune. Oh. Rubber band, won't you play your haunting theme again to me, while I eat my scones and drink my cup of tea? The sun is warm, but it's a lonely afternoon.
Ken Pitt devoted himself to his new protege, even providing him with a room at his London flat. And Bowie was a keen pupil, absorbing as much as he could. Ken Pitt.
It was Pygmalion-like to a certain extent, but there was nothing goblimey about David. I think that if there was anything about me that was Higgins, it would have been the books that he read that I had there. And very, very often our conversations, because we used to spend hours and hours talking in the flat. I was a collector of late 1890s works, and so he would have seen the Oscar Wilde first editions, a lot of Aubrey Beardsley, I know that he would go through the books on the shelves and suddenly grab one and say, "Crumbs, you've got that," and then usually I'll sit down on the floor cross-legged and read it. I don't think he got up until he finished it. He was an avid reader, and there were shelves and shelves of books at the flat, and it was marvellous to see his eyes open wide when he'd suddenly seen something that had registered.
As flower power beckoned and rock music became increasingly serious and meaningful, Ken Pitt negotiated a contract with Decca's new progressive label, D-Ram. But Bowie ignored any prevailing trends to come up with tracks as quirky and frivolous as The Laughing Gnome. It was as if he had cut the record as a prank, to have fun with all the studio gadgetry.
Just because I could do it. Because it was there. I think... it just seemed like the most silly song to do, and I quite like silliness, plain silliness. It never really fazed me. I mean, it was just like that inconsequential to us. We just did this very silly track, because we had the technology. But it was, it was like we were still having fun, slowing tapes down and stuff like that. I'd always associate Laughing Gnome with Gus Sturgeon, because he used to sit there doing tricks with his glasses whilst I was making it. He would balance them on his... I'd make them do funny things. He'd touch the back and the fronts would go up and down on his nose. But he used to keep me in fits because he was a great visual comedian, very Chaplin-esque, Gus. Actually, rather reminded me of Peter Sellers in a way.
Gus Dudgeon was the engineer on the session.
I am a gnome, in fact. It may be difficult to recognise it from my voice now, but I've grown up a little bit. A little older. We sat around dreaming up those terrible jokes. We obviously didn't spend very long on it.
I was walking down the high street when I heard footsteps behind me, and there was a little old man, scarlet and grey, chuckling away. Well, he trotted back to my house, and he sat beside the telly with his tiny hands on his tummy, chuckling away, laughing all day. Oh, to report you to the gnome office. Gnome office. I'm a laughing gnome and you can't catch me. I'm a laughing gnome and you can't catch me, said the laughing gnome. Well, I gave him roasted toadstools and a glass of dandelion wine. Then I put him on a train to Eastbourne, carried his bag and gave him a fag.
Have you got a light, boy?
Hey, where do you come from?
No man's land.
Oh, really? In the morning, when I woke up, he was sitting on the edge of my bed with his brother whose name was Fred. He brought him along to sing me a song. Oh, I don't hear it. Yeah, what's that clicking noise?
That's Fred. He's a metro gnome.
Ha ha ha, hee hee hee.
The Laughing Gnome eventually became a top 10 hit in 1973, but on first release was a complete flop. Bowie's first album, issued in the summer of 1967, fared little better and confirmed that he was now carving his own idiosyncratic niche. Gus Dudgeon was as bewildered as anyone.
Well, of course, the thing with it is that it is a weird album. And when I listen to it now, I can't believe that it was actually released, because it must have been about the weirdest thing D-Ram had ever put out. In fact, it's probably one of the weirdest things any record company have ever put out. And it was so tame as well. It's incredibly tame, really, when you listen to it. It doesn't ever really get going by today's standards. I don't think it's slotted in anywhere. I think that was part of what made it so charming and so different, really. I mean, the mere fact that he did the Gravedigger thing with no accompaniment at all other than me raiding the Decca sound effects library for thunder and stuff. And he did that actually standing in a box of gravel. I mean, those footsteps are him And the sneeze is incredibly good. In fact, if you listen to that, that's a very early piece of acting from Bowie, and it's actually pretty damn good, because, I mean, how many people do you know who can fake a sneeze? I certainly can't. Excuse me.
Please, Mr. Gravedigger, don't feel ashamed as you dig little holes for the dead and the maimed. Please, Mr. Gravedigger, I couldn't care if you found a golden locket full of some girl's hair and you put it in your bucket. Pour it down. A mother doesn't know about your sentimental joy. She thinks it's down below with the rest of her toys. A ma wouldn't understand, so I won't tell. So keep your golden locket all safely hid away in your pocket. Yes, Mr. GD, you see me every day. Standing in the same spot by a certain grave. Mary Ann was only 10, full of life and oh so gay, and I was the wicked man who took her life away. Very selfish. Oh God. No, Mr. GD, you won't tell. And just to make sure that you keep it to yourself, I've started digging holes, my friend, and this one here's for you. Look at our girl. It's plainly, that's not what it is. Oh, what's this? Don't you be allowed.
Coming on like a demented combination of Lionel Bart and Syd Barrett, with a dollop of Anthony Newley thrown in for good measure, Bowie saw his vignettes and story songs miss their target audience completely. But the album was an important stage in his evolution as a writer.
I was aware of what story form should be like, and I knew that it wasn't the right thing to write a completely pat little piece that didn't have the twists and turns that you find in real life. So it was my first sort of, stumbling steps toward trying to write both sides of the ambiguities of life rather than just a straightforward, hey, it's a wonderful life kind of thing. Because I was never comfortable when I did come to do those kinds of songs that were kind of the breezy, brisk pieces where the sun shone in all the time. I always felt, this doesn't smack true somehow. Not for me, anyway.
Perhaps the most bizarre aspect of making the album was Bowie's naive decision to contribute not only songs, voice, and guitar, but orchestral arrangements too, despite having had absolutely no previous experience.
Dick Fernley, the bass player in the Buzz, and I got out a book from the library called The Encyclopedia of Music to learn how to write music. And we actually believed that if we just got the manuscript and got the book, we could write all these string parts. Because, you just have to put the dots down, don't you? Because we knew the notes we wanted. So we did. We wrote from scratch, not understanding a note about music. We taught ourselves the basics of music during this 4-week period preceding doing the DRAM album, and wrote out all the string parts. And the guy who led the string ensemble on the album was so helpful because he made sense of what we'd written. And I think he was quite sort of bemused that these two kids are kind of, slaved over this stuff, trying to write music with no knowledge of music whatsoever, formal training at all. And we'd actually gone to the bother of trying to write the string parts out. And we didn't realise how ludicrous they must have looked, an amateur and whatever. And I guess it was just the audacity of it that none of the guys laughed us out of the studio. And they actually tried to play our parts and they made sense of them. And they're quite nice little string parts. And we were writing for bassoon and everything, So, Stravinsky could do it, then we can do it, It was like, let's get some of those counterpoint kind of things going.
Just look through your window. Look who sits outside. Little me is waiting, standing through the night. When you walk out through your door, I'll wave my flag and shout, ah, beautiful baby, my burning desire started on Sunday. Give me your heart and I'll love you till Tuesday. Da-da-da-dum, 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 da-da-da-dum. Let the wind to blow through your hair. Be nice to the big blue sea. Don't be afraid of the man in the moon, because it's only me. I shall always watch you until my love runs dry. Ah, beautiful baby, my heart's aflame. I'll love you till Tuesday. My head's in a whirl and I'll love you till Tuesday. Love, 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 love you till Tuesday. Love, 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 love you till Tuesday. Da 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 dum, da 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 dum, ba 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 bum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. Da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. Well, I might stretch it till Wednesday.
In 1968, Bowie's musical career slid into the doldrums as D-Ram rejected 3 further tracks offered for release as singles. Ken Pitt endeavored to keep the pot boiling by sending his artist to various film auditions, one of which yielded a bit part in The Virgin Soldiers. Bowie also found time to join the cast of Pierrot in Turquoise, the latest touring production of mime artist Lindsay Kemp.
Oh, dear old Lindsay. Lindsay was a trip and a half. I've never known anybody commit suicide so many times. I think Lindsay, he lived on his emotions. I mean, he was a wonderful influence because he was so... His day-to-day life was the most theatrical thing I'd ever seen, ever. I mean, it was everything I thought Bohemia probably was. He was living. I mean, it was very sort of exotic in as much that he lived in Bateman buildings on Bateman Street above a strip club, and I thought that was really kind of, sensational. And he had a cast of characters that used to run in and out of his place that I'd never seen anything like it in my life. From Jack Burkett, who was completely bald, blind dancer of the most exquisite body language when he worked on stage that was just unbelievable. I mean, Lindsay was very good, but Jack was something else. And then strippers would be coming up and borrowing cups of sugar from Lindsay from downstairs, and it was just this circus, absolute circus. I joined the circus.
By the age of 21, Bowie had already flitted through rhythm and blues, narrative songs, mime, and film. He now put together Feathers, extravagantly described as a mixed media group.
Feathers was a trio that I put together because I wanted my girlfriend working with me at the time. Her name was Hermione Farthingale, and I absolutely adored her. I mean, she was the real first love in my life. And she was a ballet dancer and a very good little singer and very sweet little voice. And she played a little bit of bed-sitting room guitar, that kind of folk guitar that every girl that looked beautiful could play in those. I don't know why, but all the beautiful girls could play a little bit of acoustic guitar. And they all did Joan Baez numbers. Oh, dear. And I was completely, soppy for all this. I thought, oh, she's so great, and I've got to work with her. And we'd throw in some... I think sort of the Liverpool poets were quite big at the time, and I'd gotten into all this Liverpool poetry, North of England poetry, and we'd set some of those poems against music. I think I used to do Roger McGough's On the Bus. That was one of the things that I used to do. And so we used to do these little things, and we used to do some mime pieces, and it was like just throwing in everything I knew to keep an audience's attention more than anything else. Again, all this period, this whole late 60s was like, well, what works and what doesn't work? Let's try all this stuff. There's got to be something in here somewhere that makes some kind of real sense. It's like playing around with colours, when you're doing a painting, and it's like, no, it's not, we'll try a bit of blue then, and it's like, you're trying to put this pastiche of things together, this juxtaposition. And I was very heavy into the whole idea of Brian Geist and William Burroughs cut-ups, and I knew that if you put the wrong things together, you often got the right end result. And it was trying to find what those wrong things were, what you could put against each other that would make some kind of nonsense.
While walking on Red Rooster's lawn, a charred-faced man I spied. He blew into his handkerchief and stuttered as he sighed. I wish I played the doo-dah horn is fine. I'd sell my house and burn the coach to make this daydream mine. Do-dah do, do-dah, do-dah do, do-dah, do-dah do, do-dah, do-dah do.
Was flying through an azure cloud, a crystal girl I spied. She kissed the bluebird's honey tongue and stuttered as she sighed. I wish to sing the Chingling song is fine. I'd give my jewels and caviar to make this daydream mine.
Shing-a-Ling by Feathers, recorded for Love You Till Tuesday, a promotional film, which Ken Pitt bankrolled in the hope of reversing Bowie's flagging fortunes. As it happened, the film was greeted with little enthusiasm, but another song which Bowie had written for it, Space Oddity, was distinctive enough for Mercury Records to offer him a contract.
We're going to do what we can with the material that we now do, and some of it is being considered as single material, but we'll leave that up to you to sort out. Anyway, the first one's called Space Oddity. Go.
Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. 10. Ground control to Major Tom. 8. 7. 6. 5. Down engines on. 3. 2. Checking 1. And may God's love be with you.
During his last days with D-Ram, Bowie had hooked up with Tony Visconti, an enthusiastic young American producer around town. But though they had now become good friends, Visconti refused to have anything to do with Space Oddity.
David Bowie came to me as a young musician full of ideals, and we discussed nothing less than Buddhism and politics, and the whole tenor of our relationship was based on high ideals, and all his songs were poetic, and we liked the same kind of music. And when he wrote Space Oddity, he genuinely wrote it one night as an idea. He made a lovely little demo of it, and he was under pressure to come up with something commercial. He really, this is the man who said that the Fugs were the greatest thing on earth. Lou Reed, in the form of Velvet Underground, was the greatest thing on earth. And now he comes up with something incredibly crass and simple, and it was, as I called it, a cheap shot, a cheap shot of publicity. I told David, I said, if you put out Space Oddity as a single, it's going to be a hit, but you'll never, ever write another song like that again, which I believe he never has, actually. And I said, you'll have a problem. I said, because it's a novelty record. It's not a David Bowie record. It's a novelty record, like Ernie the Milkman or something like that. I put it in that category at the time. So anything else now, you can't follow that up. And he couldn't. And I expressed it. And David said, I'm under pressure from Ken Pitt, my record company, to record this song. Everyone likes it, except the producer, me. So that was my dilemma. And I stuck to my guns. I was a very idealistic young man. I'd probably record it now because I think anything goes now. But in those days, that was the sort of thing that motivated us. And I simply passed it down to Gus. I said, look, I don't want to record this for all the reasons I just stated. And Gus says, I think it's fabulous and I'd love to work with Bowie. He was really keen to work with David and to be his producer.
Gus Dudgeon.
Tony was in the next office to me, literally. He called up and he said, you know Bowie, don't you? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, he's got this song, which I don't like very much, but he's got to record it. It was the clincher of the deal, in fact. He had to do Space Oddity. That was really what got him the record contract. And I don't like it. Do you want to have a go at it? So I said, well, let me have a listen to the demo. You've only got to listen to the demo and try and think yourself back to 1968, 69, which is difficult. But if you can imagine hearing that demo in the light of what other music there was around, this is the most innovative thing I'd heard in years. And I knew Bowie was an innovative writer anyway, with a very interesting turn of phraseology as far as the lyrics was concerned. When I'd worked with him as an engineer, he used to come in with these odd lineups. You get a rhythm section and a tuba would come in, or 2 woodwind and a couple of guitars or something. So I knew there'd probably be something weird in the back of his mind that he wanted to do. And when we got down to talking about it, he said, no, as far as I'm concerned, what I've done on the demo is pretty much what I want to do. It's just a question of expanding it from that point. So the only thing that I really wanted to do was the mellotron. And obviously the stylophone, because the stylophone was a pretty weird noise anyway. And it was difficult to get. At first, I couldn't find anybody to play mellotron, and then Visconti recommended Rick Wakeman.
So they phoned me up because they wanted to put a mellotron on to enhance with the string sound, to give it a more of an eerie sound. And the only person they knew who could keep the thing in tune, Tony Visconti had said to Gus, was this long-haired idiot who played at the Top Rank Ballroom in Reading. So I got this call and I came down to the studio and we did it all in, I think, about 3 hours. In my entire life, there have been about half a dozen occasions where, when I've heard pieces of music or played on pieces of music, the best way I can describe it, it's made the hair stand up on the back of my neck, and you know that that is something very, very special. Space Odyssey was the very first time that ever happened to me.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. 10. Ground control 9, to Major Tom. 8, 7, 6. Commencing countdown, engines on. 3, 2. Check ignition and may God's love be with you. This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade, and the papers want to know whose shirts you wear. Now it's time to leave.
It was actually written because of 2001. That was the reason it got written, because I went stoned out of my mind to see the movie, and it really freaked me out, especially the trip passage when you're going through the universe. I thought, oh, this is glorious. I want to be in there. And it came very quickly after that. I wrote that very quickly after that. And I was really over the moon when I didn't want to say that, when it was used as part of the background track for the landing of Neil Armstrong. I mean, I think they used it on that program, on the moon landing program. I just couldn't believe they were doing that. I was thinking, did they know what this song's about?
After almost 6 years as a professional musician, Space Oddity gave Bowie his first hit, reaching the top 5 as the 60s drew to a close. The B-side, Wild-Eyed Boy from Free Cloud, with its sparse arrangement of 12-string guitar and cello played by Paul Buckmaster, was a clear signal that Bowie had refined his songwriting style.
That was actually a fairly successful song in my terms, only because I stayed with the narrative form, but I got it. But it was psychologically a bit more interesting than anything I'd written there, because I think I related it to myself a lot more than anything I'd written up until then. There was something about it that touched areas of my fears about my own insecurities socially and as maybe emotionally, that I felt it very hard to make a real connection with people, you know. And that things and places and songs seemed to mean more to me than people, you know. And it was this feeling of isolation that I had ever since I was a kid was really starting to manifest itself through songs like that, Wild-Eyed Boy. And I said to Paul, you know, what about doing that? You know, because you were working a string idea up for that. He said, but I only know the cello part. And I said, well, just play the cello then, you know. So sure, that'll suffice for this. Yes, Paul, it'll be great. And so we just did it like that. Yeah, it's a nice piece of work.
Solemn-faced, the village settles down, undetected by the stars, and the hangman plays the mandolin before he goes to sleep. And the last thing on his mind is the wild-eyed boy imprisoned 'neath the covered wooden shaft, folds the rope into its bag, blows his pipe of smoulders, blankets smoke into the room. And the day will end for some as the night begins for one. Staring through the message in his eyes lies a solitary sun. From the mountain called the Free Cloud, where the eagle dare not fly, and the patience in his eye gives no indication for the townsmen to decide. So the village dreadful yawns, pronouncing gross diversion as the label for the dog. Oh, it's the madness in his eyes as he breaks the night to cry, it's really me.
Wild-Eyed Boy from Free Cloud. Undeterred by Tony Visconti's earlier rejection of Space Oddity, Bowie reunited with him and set about recording an album. Called simply David Bowie, it mixed up-tempo folk rock with gentle love songs, like Letter to Hermione, perhaps the most autobiographical track.
Oh, God, yes, my heart broke. You know, she ran off with she was doing, I don't know what it was, but I know what it was. She was doing a film called Song of Norway. I mean, which was this funny romp in Norway with bits of ballet in it, and that she was cast in that. And she fell in love with one of the actors on it, and she left me for him. God, no, I didn't get over that for such a long time. It really broke me up. So I wrote my Letter to Hermione on my album. I thought, that'll show her. If I write something that public, then she'll see that she really messed me up. I never heard back from her.
The hand that wrote this letter sweeps the pillow clean. So rest your head and read a treasured dream. I care for no one else but you. I tear my soul to cease the pain. I think maybe you feel the same. What can we do? I'm not quite sure what we're supposed to do. So I've been writing just for you. They say your life is going very well. They say you sparkle like a different girl. But something tells me that you hide. When all the world is warm and tired, you cry a little in the dark. Well, so do I. I'm not quite sure what you're supposed to say, but I can see it's not okay. He makes you laugh, he brings you out in style. He treats you well and makes you up real fine. And when he's strong for you. And when you kiss, it's something new. But did you ever call my name just by mistake? I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to do. So I'll just write some love to you.
Letter to Hermione. As Tony Visconti predicted, Bowie was unable to find a hit follow-up to Space Oddity, though they thought they might have the answer in The Prettiest Star, which Bowie had written for the new love in his life, Angela Barnett. Playing lead guitar on the record was Bowie's old pal Mark Bolan, now a chart contender himself after a similarly tortuous apprenticeship.
I think it was Visconti trying to get us back together again as pals and not have us quite so sort of, wary of each other. But which was fairly petty of me, because I really think Mark was a wonderful guitar player. Because what I liked about him is what I still like about musicians today is when they are uninformed technically. I mean, he had a totally naive approach to the guitar. A lot of what he played was incorrect, but it worked. It was just he had a magic about his guitar playing. It really stands up to time listening to him play now. He's really quite a wonderful guitar player.
Cold fire, you got everything but cold fire. You will be my rest and peace, child. I moved up to take a place near you, so tired. It's the sky that makes you feel tried. It's a trick to make you see wide. It can all but break your heart in pieces. Staying back in your memory are the movies in the dark. to sing a song of when I loved the prettiest star. One day, though it might as well be someday, you will rise up high and take us all away, all because of what you are, the prettiest star.
The Prettiest Star, with Mark Bolan on lead guitar.
Now, at that time, we both knew that we were both going to be the biggest thing since sliced bread, but we weren't quite sure which of us was going to do it first, so there was more rivalry there, and we were a little bit wary of each other. Although we used to go to each other's gigs, I don't think out of support, but more to find out what the other one was doing, you know. What's he doing that I can do and all that? And the very first glam rock gig that I did, I think, was in February 1970 at the Roundhouse with this band called Hype. And it was Tony Visconti on bass, Mick Ronson on guitar, and John Cambridge on drums, and myself on rhythm guitar and keyboard thing. And our respective girlfriends and wives and whatever put together all these really ridiculous, like, cartoon capers comic hero costumes, and they were all sort of superhero things, and it was all made out of lurex and glitter materials, and it looked like a pantomime probably.
Tony Visconti.
We all had names. I became Hype Man, and they made this lovely Superman outfit out of long underwear for me, a white leotard. Or my girlfriend crocheted a little sort of swimming costume brief out of silver crochet material, and I had a cape, and I had a big letter H on my chest, so I was Hype Man. And Mick Ronson was Gangster Man, because we borrowed a gold lame suit, like an Elvis suit, but we found a yellow fedora, like a gangster fedora for him to wear, so he was Gangster Man. John was dressed as a pirate, so he was Pirate Man. And David was Rainbow Man. I think the only thing left in the budget was to go out and buy loads of different colored scarves. And David had these scarves tied to his arms, and they were draping down. When he opened his arms and he played the guitar, the scarves fell to the sides, you know. So we were the very first glam rock band ever in London.
Mark, out of solidarity, he turned up wearing a breastplate that he bought from Woolworths, one of those Knights of the Round Table things for $8, so it was only partially filled his chest and looked really rather silly. But I mean, Mark could wear anything and presume that it was the greatest fashion statement ever. But I mean, at least he turned up, and he was the only one in the audience that wasn't totally indifferent to us. I mean, we weren't even booed. I mean, it was really just the most depressing night of our lives, because we thought we were kind of, you know, smart, but nobody even, I don't think they even looked at the stage. So it was all to no avail. Maybe we should have been lit. But that was a wonderful show, in as much that I knew that theatre was for me after that.
And I cried.